low vision and contact lens department. There are currently a bunch of doctors up there working to do anything we can with a contact lens. And I'm here to talk today about some of the principles that make it work, make a contact lens work, and make our practice work pretty well. The picture here is a picture that I actually took out of the wing of a plane. That's what you're seeing at the very top there. The plane was no bigger than a minivan, and that picture was taken in rural western Alaska on September 19th, which is plenty of fall colors for September in Alaska. 2011, when I was traveling through up there. That was a fun memory right there, but I'll get started with the contact lenses. Beyond the sphere, things that we have to think of outside of a spherical lens that we need to utilize to make a contact lens work as good as possible. The basic premise of any contact lens fit is that patients will desire and they are looking for ways to see and freedom from their glasses. That is a really common motivation that I hear from patients all the time is I want to get out of my glasses. I don't like wearing them. I don't like the way they look for such and such activity, or they get in the way when I'm playing tennis or something along those lines. Soft contact lenses is the bulk of what I'm going to talk about today. They're available in so many different forms, so many different permutations, so many different ways to wear them that it can be somewhat overwhelming. There are just so many options to try to narrow down and pick out for that particular patient, and they can enhance the function and clarity of vision, and they can really make it useful for people with demanding visual tasks. Even swimmers are people that can do well with the right contact lenses. Modern contact lenses are a far cry from the contact lenses that were out when they began 30 years ago or so. They really had some soft lenses that were available. It was actually in the 50s or so that they really started to come out with some soft contact lenses, but they didn't catch on because at that point it was basically like a piece of saran wrap that somebody sort of cut out with scissors and sort of stuck in the eye, and it kind of helped the vision. The stuff that's out today is a lot more advanced and a lot more effective in the way we treat people's vision. It's actually simple. The contact lenses that you see come in trials, and picking the right trial for the patient just takes a little bit of guidance. You want to find a balance between the patient's comfort and their vision. So sometimes we have to go with a stiffer type of lens because it's going to provide a better visual outcome. Those lenses tend to have a little bit more initial awareness when you put them in the eye, but then eventually they start to see pretty good and the comfort comes along really well. And there's a bunch of contact lenses out there in the world of dailies that you can just throw in the eye, and actually there's one or two brands that I put in my eyes that feel better than when I wear my glasses. I'm a longtime contact lens wearer. I'm used to having something in my eye, so it's no big deal. But when I put on a Dailies Total 1, it feels better than physically wearing my glasses to work. So there's a whole bunch of availabilities there. Balance between the fit of the lens and the health of the eye. A really particularly tight or a steep base curve soft contact lens can actually become too tight and hold tears underneath it throughout the course of the day. Those tears become part of the metabolism of the epithelial cells in the cornea over a period of a few hours, and it can actually create a toxic reaction on the cornea. It's something to watch out for when someone comes in with a contact lens that's not moving when they blink. If they have a contact lens that's not moving at all when they blink and their eye gets red only at the end of the day, there's a very good chance that they have a very mild, low-grade toxic reaction that you're playing with, and changing the base curve or the material of the lens will alleviate that entire problem, and it's not needed to be treated with any kind of an infection. There's also a very, very fine line where you're walking with the patient's expectations hand in hand with the properties and the optical potential of a contact lens. For the advanced presbyopia contact lenses, they are not going to be able to see 100% of things that their eyes gaze upon at every single moment of every single day like they did when they were 20. That doesn't exist. Can we get them through the majority of their tasks? Yes, but telling them what tasks are going to be highlighted by the contact lens, telling them what kind of tasks are highlighted by a specific brand of contact lens is going to help you to guide that patient through their expectations so that you can meet or exceed them when the patient's actually wearing that contact lens. And that is the most important part. like I said, the modern materials and contact lenses, the trials that I have in my office today, are pretty much, if well cared for, very healthy for the eyes. If health is a concern, there's always another option for a little bit more oxygen, a little bit better dependability for resistance to bacteria, and different ways to talk about compliance with your patients to make sure that they don't end up with some kind of an infection, either a mild one, which is simple to treat with some antibiotics, and they just don't like being out of the contact lenses for a week, or a more significant one that could lead them down the road to a corneal transplant. There are more risks to wearing a contact lens than glasses, and we do everything that we can to minimize those risks, but they still exist. So having a conversation, letting the patient know that there are risks is one of the best ways to go about it, and then treat anything that comes up along the way. Some of the materials that we have in our office, these are all completely available, widely available. You can pick them up from a number of manufacturers that I'll talk a little bit more about. The hydrogel material was really the first one. It was a plastic bound to water. That was the saran wrap type of lens that I was talking about. They came out with better ways to make that. They impregnated it with more water one way or another. They just changed the polymers of the actual plastics to make the original AccuView lens, the frequency lenses, the ProClear line of lenses. Those are hydrogel lenses. They have their water content in them to help make them more comfortable. The trouble with them is that the dry eye people from today's world in an older type of hydrogel lens that use a computer. When you use a computer, your blink rate decreases. When you blink less, the water can actually just evaporate right on out of the tear layer. And if the water evaporates out of a lens that's made out of plastic, and the water is part of what bends the light in the plastic to make the lens work, the actual effective lens power will change. And that doesn't mean over-refract and give them an extra diopter of minus or plus. It means change the lens material. So when a lens is matching up with your refraction, matching up with your clinical findings when it goes into the eye, and then fading towards the end of the day or only during work hours, then you know that it's a problem with the material of the lens and that water content. Now, the old ones have like biometric 55, frequency 55, HP 59. That refers to the water content. And that was roughly the percentage, or what we call the decay of the lens. How much oxygen gets through the lens is dependent on how much water was there, because the oxygen dissolves into the water of the lens, transmits through the water, through the plastic to the cornea to help with the metabolism. Silicone hydrogel is different. Silicone is a silicone impregnated plastic. The silicone actually creates air channels that allow oxygen molecules, O2, to actually pass through as a gas. Since it goes in as a gas, it's a lot more easily and readily received. And believe it or not, a lot of the silicone hydrogen materials are so effective at transmitting oxygen that they can pull from the palpebral conjunctiva enough oxygen to stain a lens overnight, which brings us to the extended wear type of contact lens. Those lenses are pretty widely available. The FDA approval isn't so much based on how much oxygen gets through the lens, but how well they were able to test its resistance to infection. So the Air Optics Night and Day, that's an extended wear lens. I'll talk a little bit more. It actually passed the FDA's test for 30 days of extended wear. You guys all have heard of the AccuView Oasis lens. That's your favorite bandage lens for that person who comes with an corneal abrasion. And the reason for that is it's approved for up to 7 days of extended wear. And it's actually marketed that way now. So these are just different ways to use the lenses that are available to us. And the other part of it is coatings. Some of the manufacturers use a coating on the surface of the lens to make it resist bacterial deposits and protein deposits that lead to bacteria deposits. And those coatings are also there to help hold water against the lens. That's what gives them their comfort and their stability. That's also the part that breaks down over time that causes a lens to be only good for 2 weeks or for a month or for a quarter. I'm talking a lot about these different ways to use the contact lenses as I go through the materials. They're so linked together, I just can't fit it all on one slide. The daily disposable lenses, there's more than a dozen options in the world of daily disposables right now in my office upstairs. If you want to look at it, there's just a whole wall of all kinds of contact lenses that we can use that are in the world of daily disposables. Different manufacturers will tell you different things about why their lens works. The Dailies Total 1 that I mentioned, I put that in my eye. It feels like better than my glasses because it's giving me an excellent source of vision. It has a mildly aspheric design, which helps to correct for the peripheral distortion of my own cornea when my pupil becomes large. That lens has a unsurpassed silicone hydrogen material in it. So it is a daily wear lens with the silicone oxygen transmissibility, and it doesn't need to be all that great at repelling bacteria because it's a single-use lens. And there are a handful of patients that will wear that lens for 2 days and they can get away with it. And in response to that, what we did was we made the Aqua Comfort Plus lens. And some people say, oh, by the end of the day, this lens feels terrible. Why would I ever fit it? Because if you actually put it in your fingers and rubbed it, it'll disintegrate. And the people who market that lens say, well, no, that's the best thing ever. You're going to get excellent compliance. If they try to wear that lens for 2 days, it's going to fall apart in their eye. There you go. Now we have a way to do it. You have to look at it from either side of the coin. If you have someone who's really abusive to their contact lenses, the Air Optics Aqua Comfort Plus, Alcon has the longest names ever, the Aqua Comfort Plus Daily Lens. That is a really good one to use for compliance because it will literally disintegrate. The 2-week lenses are pretty much capitalized by the Vistakon company, the AccuView brand of lenses. They just released 3 weeks ago their first monthly design since the AccuView lens was approved sometimes for monthly in the late 70s. So they've really taken the market on the 2-week daily wear disposable lens. The AccuView Oasis is the one that's approved for extended wear for 7 days, but you're not supposed to wear it for more than 7 days. So instead of giving you a 24-pack, they give a 54-pack. So there's 54 weeks worth of lenses that you wear each one for a week, solid. And with that one, the less you take it in and out of your eye, the better the silicone tends to hold up. So that actually works out pretty well, but it is a little bit more expensive because you're getting a 2-week lens. You're just multiplying out how often you replace it. And then there's the monthly that are considered daily wear disposables. Those are really common. They've been around for a long time. Most of those lenses have some kind of a coating, with the exception of the Cooper Vision lines. The coatings allow for the water to sit right on the surface of that lens. They make them pretty comfortable, but because it's a monthly lens, the lens, what we call modulus, which is a factor of the lens regarding the stiffness. I didn't put that in the slides. It's not all that exciting. But that makes it stiffer or less stiff, and they're a little more stiff. So people have a little more awareness the first day they wear a monthly lens. And I tell them, if you've had problems in the past with a 2-week lens feeling terrible and only lasting 10 days, the monthly lens is going to feel about the same on day 1 and day 30. It's going to feel about the same. And one of the best ways to tell your patient that they've worn their lenses too long when they come in, oh, I haven't seen you in a year and a half, and I only bought 1 box of 6 lenses. You can pretty much tell that when you put a new lens in, did it feel amazing? Was it the best thing ever? Do you want a daily lens? And they're like, no, I couldn't afford it. Well, okay, we're going to do this monthly lens, but we're going to teach you how to do it. If you put a new lens in and it feels amazing, you wore the last one too long. When you put in a new lens, it feels about the same. That's about right. And some people in a monthly lens can only get 3 weeks out of it during their allergy season or because of eye dryness or because of that. So you can modify the schedules. That's what they're approved for, and what the patient will wear it for that is in a healthy way does not always match up exactly with what the FDA says, but it works with your clinical judgment to do that. We also have the monthly extended wear, the Air Optics Night and Day. That lens actually tends to perform best if you completely leave it in the eye for the entire 30 days. Every time you touch that lens, you actually break apart little bits of the silicone surface. It's a coated lens to help to prevent bacteria from sticking to it, but it's done by plasma treating. Literally ionized plasma goes over the surface to change the surface silicone molecules to accept water. And when you rub an Air Optics Night and Day lens over the period of a month every single night, you will break down those ionic bonds of the silicone and it will start to repel water. It'll start to look like, under the slit lamp, a freshly waxed car with little beads of water all over it. You want to watch out for that because that means that they're over-cleaning a lens. That can be done. And you want to try to guide them to, let's try to do this a little bit differently if you still want to wear this lens, but you want to have the potential to sleep in. So if someone comes in abusing their contact lenses, I'll reach for the night and day because I know that the FDA says they could physically sleep in that for 30 days and have an extremely low risk of infection. Similar risk to a typical monthly lens is what they actually published out as how that lens was decided upon being a 30-day lens. The dailies are obviously your biggest one against infection, but if someone goes and takes them on a camping trip and throws them in their eyes when they're in their tent, they can still get an infection. It's all the same. So we just need to pay attention to how they're using it. And then we have, I didn't talk about it a lot in this lecture, it's more for customized people where you have a quarterly or an annual replacement lens. Those are some of our cosmetic lenses that we use for dramatic corneal scarring or something to control achromatopsia glare or something along those lines. I'll cover that in a future lecture, but they do exist. They're out there and they have their purposes. But for today, I'll try to stick with ones that are what we have on all of our shelves. And we got to look at a lot of different factors to make the right lens choice. We have a long patient discussion when we're talking about contact lenses because I'm going to have to hit them pretty hard on how to take care of their lenses, how to clean their lenses, how to put them in, how to take them out. And a lot of times that can take up a lot of our time, particularly with my students that work with me and the other doctors in the office know we got to teach this person how to get it in and out of their eyes safely before we let them go. I just had a patient go, she cut her nails. She didn't cut them short enough, so she's coming back again next week because she just can't get them in. Once she learns how, you can modify your way to get them in, but the first round on a 55-year-old patient with nails that were literally 3 inches long, I didn't think that insertion removal was going to go very well. So what we do is we tell the patient, you need to have some goals. What do you want to do with your contact lenses? And one of the good ones is, I want to start this weekend. I'm in someone's wedding. Okay, great. We have a lens for that. We'll get you started. You're going to get a trial. The motivation can also be that someone's wedding is coming up, but the motivation could be that they like playing sports. They want them for practice, and they want them for the actual games. And people with higher and higher prescriptions have a higher and higher preference to use a lens for sports. High enough, once you get past -4 or 5, they're going to be a daily, every day I want to wear contact lenses. I want to get rid of these glasses because it's the best way I can think to go on. And then a lot of clinical constraints play into it. Clinical constraints include allergies and dry eye, and they also can, to some extent, the prescription. Once you get into a higher prescription or a higher amount of astigmatism, you've got a few less options. Now, the daily lenses go up to about -2.25 astigmatism. They go up pretty well in the world of sphere from about +6 to maybe -12 in the world of daily contact lenses. We have those, not necessarily in stock, but we have that availability now. So we have a healthy lens for like 98.5% of the people that can come through our office that are looking for a typical soft contact lens. And the last part of it is the wear schedule. So if you have someone who really just wants them for sports, really just wants them to play a couple of basketball games, maybe go to a couple of their rehearsals or their practices and go back and forth, then you've got a patient who's going to do great with dailies. They're going to get a 90-pack for each eye, and they're going to order every 7 or 8 months and check in with you from time to time because that's the way they're going to wear their contact lenses. Now, if they discover through going through the sports and going through activities that they want to wear the contact lens all the time, and they start to feel like it's becoming too expensive, you can transition that person over. It's possible. The refraction is really important. It helps us define the potential visual acuity, and this is one of those situations where accuracy absolutely counts. Getting that prescription right is going to help you predict the contact lens the most accurately that you can, and it's going to give the patient a very reasonable expectation of what they can see. So if your patient is 60-something years old and has a little bit of cataract and their best corrected vision in their glasses is 20/30 in the right eye and 20/25 in the left, you're not going to magically make that better with a contact lens. It's just not going to happen. Unless they happen to be like -12, and you end up going with like a -10 contact lens because of vertex distance, and you work your way out. And just because everything is physically larger, they end up being 20/30 plus and 20/25 plus. That's one of the scenarios where the contact lens could potentially work better, but that's not very likely. For the most part, your refraction is going to give them what they're going to see out of a typical soft contact lens. Even if they have keratoconus and you refract them and their vision's terrible, without using a hard lens, any of the soft lenses are still going to give you about the same vision. It's not going to give you that much boost. So it helps to give you an idea where the patient's going to land. It helps you to explain to the patient that this is the best we can do in glasses. The contact lenses are not a magic bullet for a regular cornea. They're a magic bullet for an irregular cornea, keratoconus, or a post-transplant, but they're not the magic bullet for the routine patients that come through our offices most of the time. Where would a lecture about contact lenses be without some calculations? We have to figure out how to make it work. This is one of the equations that we can use to determine what we call vertex. Once you pass about -4 diopters in a sphere or astigmatism power, the gap between the lens and the eye matters. The higher that prescription goes, the more it matters, and that's represented by this equation where the power is corrected for vertex distance. F is the original lens power, X is the change in vertex and distance in meters. So we're going to go ahead and take that prescription right there and we're going to vertex it. I'm just kidding. I'm not running an actual equation on a bunch of PowerPoint slides. That's not exciting for me or you. We're going to move on. This is a distometer. This is a popular version of a way to figure out the actual power of a lens. There are very, very many. We have one in every room of our office. It's a little slide rule, and on it is a little grid with millimeters of vertex, and it will start usually around 8 or 9 and go up to around 15, because that's just where people wear their glasses for the most part. And if you're between, let's say, 4 and about a 9 in their absolute power, plus or minus, you're going to be okay using that and saying it's about 12 millimeters vertex. In reality, we have these tools. If you look closely at this, there's a red side and a black side, and it's actually a wheel. It spins. And if you can read any of the numbers on them, it goes all the way up to 25 diopters. And you can see all the way on that side of the scale that the diopter powers are much closer together. And then the distance on the red side and the black side of the chart are the distance in meters at which the glasses are resting. So you have to go up for hyperopia, which can get really confusing. If you have someone who's in a 9 and you've always done contact lenses and your -9 goes to about 775 when you vertex it for 12 or 13 millimeters, every time you go look through it, that's where it goes. And then you go and you have someone who's plus and you get the +9, and now you're at 11 1/4 and you're going, wait a minute, how in the world did that happen? It's all about how it works. And it's interesting because the myopia, when you vertex, the astigmatism correction will actually drop down because the gap between the two numbers on the corneal plane is lower. It's a whole bunch of not as exciting math, but you just need to know it. You need to know that it's going to change. What you get on that phoropter when you're over -4 is not going to be what you write in the contact lens prescription. And the patient's perspective of the problem is that these are not the same. How could I possibly see out of these glasses and these contacts? And if you don't know that the vertex equation exists, if you don't have an idea that you need to use a chart to figure it out, then you're either going to over minus or over plus your patients by maybe 3 or 4 diopters. When we have our little baby aphakic kids and we do a retinoscope reflex, a lot of times I will just take my +20 lens, hold it over their eye and shine my retinoscope through it and say, well, they're over +20. When you look at that distance, if I'm holding that lens at, let's say, about 17 or 18 millimeters, because that's as close as you're getting a +20 lens to an infant, your vertex is already past +32, which is how high our contact lenses for aphakia go. So we start there. You put that lens on the eye, you can find out if you need to go up or down a little tiny bit. As the child grows, you're going to make the changes as necessary. But that's pretty much how the vertex thing works. It makes it a little bit easier. Again, I'm going to actually run some of the numbers, but this was off of a grid. I didn't write out the actual equation. If you were going to use 12 millimeter vertex, we have to apply it to each meridian. Now, your horizontal meridian is going to be at minus 850, and for 12 millimeters, that drops to minus 725. So you can see how far off your contact lens is going to be. If you have a 35-year-old patient and you don't vertex at minus 850, they're presbyopic tomorrow. That's not a good way to do it. The other part of it is that the other meridian with the 850 and 250 becomes minus 11. And that drops even further away from its baseline. It drops all the way to 975. So your actual result power is the difference between 725 and that was supposed to be 925. That's definitely a typo. I apologize. Because it comes out to 725 minus 2 at the axis of 180. I apologize. I just noticed that. See, there, I wrote it correctly there. 725 minus 2, axis 180 is not in your trial kit. That makes it interesting. So typically what we do is we need to find a trial lens to put on this patient because they're in our office, they want a contact lens. Remember, they need it for the friend's wedding this weekend or their own. So we got to get something. So the best way to do it is typically to round down the cylinder power. They come in 0.5 steps starting at 0.75, so it's 0.75, 125, 175. So for this one, I would round it down to 175, and this is where the fun part gets us. If the patient's under 40, you're going to give that minus a quarter back to them, and you're going to give them a minus 750 spherical power, and they're going to be thrilled because for the most part, they can handle what would actually result as about a 0.12 over top of their glasses prescription, and most people up to 40 can handle a minus 0.12 extra boost, and they're going to like you for it, and their night driving is going to be just that much better. But if that patient is over 40, you don't want to give them that minus 0.12. You want to give them a plus 0.37, which would drop them to the minus 7 for the spherical power of that trial contact lens. So there's thought that goes into it, and the worst case scenario is, well, my trial set only goes up to 7. Here's your 7. Let me over-refract, and I'll order the right lens when it comes in. So that's the beauty of it. You don't get the patient coming back every single time going, these glasses are terrible, and then you have to eat a pair of $300 lenses. You're eating a trial, and you're fixing it by taking a careful over-refraction of that contact lens and moving on in the direction that patient takes you so that you can match their needs and their expectations. Here's a couple of the manufacturers that we use. These are probably the 4 biggest manufacturers of contact lenses, at least in the United States. There's a handful of other ones that are available, and these companies make lenses that are only available in Europe and China as well. So some people will come in with them from time to time, and you're just staring at it. Then you look at the name of the material, Enfilcon, Semifilcon. Then I Google it, and it tells me what lens it is in the United States, and I move to that particular lens. The Alcon and Ciba Vision, it used to be Ciba. It was kind of bought by Alcon. Cooper Vision is a standalone contact lenses and company. That's really all that they do. Visticon is a division of Johnson & Johnson. They have a research facility in Exton, and I have an office out there, so I actually get some of their research people into my office that are doing Johnson & Johnson work, and they'll get free AccuView contact lenses if they so desire, so it's kind of neat. And then Bausch & Lomb, they make a lot of the solutions that we use. They make almost all of the hard contact lens materials that are available. They were recently bought by Valiant Pharmaceuticals, and they changed the price of literally everything that Bausch & Lomb gives out, but they didn't do any research development or change to any of the products. They just sort of came in and said, the market's better, you need to raise your prices, and that's all that they did. So that was one of the interesting snafus with one of the big pharma type of companies that came in. So there's definitely some action stuff happening in that world right now. It's not the prettiest, but these guys are all out there. They're making good contact lenses. The availability of their lenses in the form of trials is actually staggering. For spherical parameters, we stock about 800 parameters of spherical lenses when you consider that we have daily lenses, 2-week lenses, monthly lenses, and 4 manufacturers with at least a dozen different brand names that follow them. Most of them come in 6 to 10 pack sets, which means that we have about 5,000 individual trial contact lenses in each of our 3 offices. It's pretty good volume, but fortunately they're very small, so they don't take up that much space, and they're pretty well organized for the most part. But you got different base curves, different diameters, and it's all pretty much by brand to get it right. So when you look at it, there's quite a few options. We're going to find a lens for that patient with that spherical prescription pretty easily. And this is the basic parameters, and they're based on spherical curves. This is the guiding principle for more than 90% of all of the manufactured lenses. At least it was. Now we have a couple of other options that are available to us, but the basics are pretty simple. You have an optical area. You have a carrier portion of the lens. That's that outside edge that helps to hold the fit. So when you're working with a soft contact lens, that's really the part where the limbus and the conjunctiva meet that's going to hold that lens in place. And the front portion of these is also important when it comes down to astigmatism correction as well. We have the old terms of regular astigmatism and, wait, these parameters don't all work spherically. They just don't. We have to have other options. With the rule and against the rule are terms for astigmatism that's lined up with 90 and lined up with 180. It was a more or less older term that was used for the prescriptions of hard contact lenses. Back in the day, when you had it with the rule, it would tend to rotate kind of like this when they blinked, and that was one of the things that was a challenge for hard contact lens fitters to adapt to. When it was against the rule, they would sort of rock up and down, and they were a little bit easier to fit. It just came down to which meridian was there. It's still utilized in cataract surgery today if you're going to do a limbal relaxing incision or use a laser to create a limbal situation and try to help the astigmatism. So with the rule and against the rule is how we talk about it. And then obliques are off on the sides. Irregular astigmatism is something between astigmatism and keratoconus. It's not quite enough to be keratoconus. And it can often be pretty well helped by using a stiff design or a stiffer modulus soft contact lens. And you're going to get a little bit better overall result with it. Residual astigmatism is the part that's not on the keratometry reading that's in the lens of the eye. So your toric implant patient that ended up needing a suture when you were all done with that cataract surgery with that nice expensive toric, and now you, I have to close with a suture, and now I have astigmatism this way and this way, and it makes a mess. So we need to correct for that sometimes, and the soft contact lenses tend to do that exceptionally well. And then the last part of it is we don't use anything spherical on anybody anymore with presbyopia. Everything has moved to the aspheric designs, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as I go. This is the basic lens. It uses a thin zone from the top and the bottom. Some of the older designs used to truncate, which means they would actually cut a perfectly linear line off the bottom right across the contact lens so that it would sit right on the lower lid. That worked well for some of the smaller diameter lenses or for people whose eyelids happen to drop down just far enough for you to get a little scleral show so you could have that lens still cover the cornea and be balanced. It's not very popular because that flat edge, as you could imagine, kind of feels like an entire eyelash is just in their eye all day. It doesn't necessarily hurt any of the tissues because it is rounded off and it's not an infectious source, but it's not that comfortable. The double slab off is where they actually take a prism and they grind it into the top and the bottom of the lens when they actually manufacture it. It's a fairly complex process. Watching the lathe do it is mind-boggling. It's really neat. I don't have a video of it, but it does look really cool. When they cut a toric lens on a lathe, as the lens spins, the needle that cuts oscillates. So when it cuts through the top of the lens and the bottom of the lens, it's closer than when it cuts through the two sides as it's spinning. And if you see it done, they spin at about 900 RPM. And if you put your hand on it, you'll just sort of feel a vibration. It sounds like your phone is just stuck on vibrate, and it cuts the whole lens. And it's pretty neat looking. A lot of the really higher level torics are made that way. They're a dehydrated button of plastic that's cut and then rehydrated to create that lens. And a lot of the lenses now are free-form. They're made in some kind of a digitally altered mold. They're all proprietary designs. They all have their own way to do it, and they come out pretty neat. This was an older design. It was the low torque design that they called for the Bausch & Lomb 66 soft lens toric. That lens, I'll just say when I started practice, we had trials in our office, but they were all expired trials. It's an old lens. It was part of the good design ideas when it first came out, but it has been surpassed. A lot of the conversation now that you're going to have with your patients is that your lens is set up like two opposing watermelon seeds, and your eyelids are squeezing it when you blink to help its center. So for the most part, you put in that lens and your little watermelon seeds work and you rotate that lens into place. For the myopes in the room, if you are nearsighted, -5, -6, -10, and you have some astigmatism in your contact lens, the next time you take it out, look for the lab's marking. The old lenses had 3 markings. Most of the new ones have 1 or 3 markings. They're all in different arrangements. It helps you as a clinician identify the lens once you've been exposed to it. The biofinity lenses use a little teardrop at 6 o'clock. The Air Optics use an almost completely invisible set of 3 lines, one at 2 at 180 and 1 at what would be 270 or 90 at the very, very bottom. Those lenses are almost invisible to see. And then the AccuView lenses typically also use a 3-mark design, but somewhere on their toric lens is a little dot matrix, 1, 2, 3. Tells you they're in an AccuView Oasis lens. And if they say they're in a 2-week lens, and that's what they were told from their eye doctor before they got to you, it's probably an AccuView lens. They're the most prescribed lens, and they work really well. They just do tend to have more deposits, and they do tend to create some eyelid irritation over the long run. So there's a bunch of information on this if you were to look through the slides about how to calculate with the base curve and figure it all out. But the basics of it is you want to try to match up with that refraction as much as possible. And you're going to have to use that information because a lot of times this question, even though it's somewhat obsolete, is asked on ophthalmology boards. I did write a couple of questions for it a couple of years ago. I don't think they're anywhere near it. I wrote review questions, but the idea is if your lens is rotated to the left, you add a little bit because the actual astigmatism is off to the side. So in order to compensate and get their visual acuity better, you're going to do that. And if it's to the right, you subtract. And that's where that LARS comes from. Left add, right subtract. It was one of the founding principles when we had Bausch & Lomb soft lens toric and frequency 55 or ProClear toric. Those were the ones that were available when I was a child. They still work. They're still available today. And these were the ways that we had to modify it. But the truth is, we've moved on. We have to tune our refractions a little bit to get there, to get to the right. Most trials come in 10-degree steps. So when you're doing a refraction for glasses, it's really easy to write 5 because that's right where the thing lands. That's where the markers are on the phoropter. It's really easy to write it. But when you go to a contact lens, that's going to be a thorn in your side. You need to figure out a way to do it. So I always say avoid ending in 5 when you're bracketing to find the axis of astigmatism. If you can end up at 46, it's going to tell you to go to 50. If you end up at 44, you're going to go to 40. And there are plenty of people out there who land right at 5. So your best bet is to go to the closest principal meridian. So other than 45 and 135, it's pretty easy to predict. If you're at 75, you go to 80 because the principal meridian would be 90. If you're at 25, you go to 20 because the principal meridian closest is 180. That's important because the closer you get to 180 or 90, the better the stability of that contact lens with those aspheric front surfaces is going to center when that patient blinks. So when you have a very oblique eye, a lot of times they get more rotation in the blink than someone without it. That's also part of why we would cut the cylinder down, because if you have a pair of glasses at 250 sil and you make it about 5 degrees off axis by mistake because you wrote it down wrong and forgot to translate it or something, when you send it to the lab and somebody did a typo, they're going to be blurry. But if they had a 2-cylinder with a little extra boost in their sear power, a lot of times their visual acuity is the same and their tolerance to that 5-degree rotation is much higher. So anytime I have a chance to do it, anytime I take one of your refractions from CPEC and convert it into a contact lens prescription, I am intentionally trying to click off a quarter here and there of the astigmatism to get that spherical equivalent to make a more stable lens. Even if I'm only looking at 75, I'll throw them in a spherical lens design just so that I don't have to worry about the instability of some of the toric lenses that are out there. Dryness and allergy are big reasons that the lenses rotate. Your eyelids get little tiny bumps, the papillae that come up, particularly the papillae and the follicles that you see in an allergic type of reaction. A lot of times you can end up with GPC if you don't treat it right away and don't remove the contact lenses. And then that contact lens, every time they blink, is going to sail up into their head and come back down. And it's going to rotate, and their vision is going to be terrible for a while until you get that all under control. So attacking that early and understanding that that's one of the complications to a lens will help you to better fit your patients. The old school people used LARS. In my office, I tell all my students, oh, that lens is 10 degrees to the left or 10 degrees to the right. Pick a different brand. This is just some of the trials that we have stocked in our office. That's Oasis for Astigmatism, One Day Moist for Astigmatism, Aqua Comfort Plus for Astigmatism, which is another one of those way too many words in their name. Then there's the Clarity One Day Toric, ProClear One Day Toric, ProClear Regular Toric, Avera Toric, Soft Lens. There are permutations of toric lenses, and you have to find one of them that's going to fit on a patient. The comfort's going to be a little bit different with each one. Again, the Air Optics lenses are going to be coated. The AccuView lenses are mostly a material with a thin coating. The Biofinity, the CooperVision lenses, are all material-based. They're completely based on what's in the material. They don't have virtually any coatings at all, and that's how they have such a slippery lens. A Biofinity lens isn't coming out of your eye unless your fingers are completely dry. They're just going to slide right on over. So, toric trials, they come in half diopter spherical steps from 0 to -6 in almost every single one of our sets. Some of them go up to +6 and -12, also in half diopter steps. And that's just in my sets. I can order every one of the quarter steps online and have it in the office in a matter of days. The stock sets come in 0.75, 1.25, 1.75, and 2.25. I have a set now that goes up to 2.75, but I don't have it in my Will's office, so I didn't put it in the lecture. And they have every single 10 degrees at every single one of those half diopter sphere powers at every one of those axes. So there's over a dozen individual brands and base curve options. So if you look down there, my conservative estimate is that I have 10,368 individual parameters in stock in the office. That's conservative. I didn't include all the trials between 0 and +6 and 6 and -12 that I have stock of in the office. I just didn't even include them. And roughly a third of them are dailies, so I have a 5-pack of every one of the dailies because you don't give someone a daily lens and say, here, give this a try this afternoon. Thanks. Give me a call if you love it. It doesn't work that way. Give them 5 of them. And that puts us at over 20,000 individual trial lenses in each one of our offices, plus the 25,000 lenses, plus the 5,000 spherical designs that I have in each one of my offices. So at any given day, up in our contact lens suite, if you wanted to take a look at a contact lens, you want to open one up, hold it in your hand, see what it looks like, maybe even put it in your own eye just to give it a shot, just to see how it feels, that is completely acceptable. Come on up and we'll set you up with a trial. I won't even give you an expired one because you came to the lecture today. It'll be great. Correction of presbyopia. This is pretty good. It's fairly straightforward, believe it or not. Once you get the contact lens fit set, it comes with a fitting guide. And you read the guide and you take the refraction and you go for it. This is one of the most important places to push plus. A lot of people are just about a half diopter over minus their whole life, and they kick it out between 45 and 55. They just drop it. One day they finally accept that distance vision is not that important anymore. I need to read, I need to function, because almost all of my day is spent in an office talking to people who are this far away from me, and I can't see any of them anymore. We need to fix that. So simultaneous or alternating vision are different ways to do it. Now, the best way, visually, the least compromise, is single vision contact lenses for distance and reading glasses from CVS, Walmart, Walgreens, wherever you want to get them. That's going to give the best visual outcome. The next one is probably the bifocal contact lenses, and the third one is monovision. Monovision is great for the patients who can handle it, who are aware of what's going on and can kind of accept it. I get about a 40% success rate on monovision, and I get about an 85 to 90% success rate on a bifocal contact lens. And that last 5%, their expectations are so high that I can only meet their expectations in distance contacts and reading glasses. So for the most part, that's what we're doing. Bifocal contact lenses are the way to go, and the fit sets really do tell you how they work. There are 100 different variations. Not all bifocal lenses are created equal. They all have the same problems with the material, the water content, and the coatings that all of the toric lenses and all of the spherical lenses do. And now you're adding to it this asphericity, simultaneous vision. So I have a couple of different diagrams here that sort of explain it. You get a reading, an intermediate, and a distance out of almost all of the lenses. But trying to choose the right one for that patient comes with only trial and error. That's the only way you're going to figure it out. The fitting guides are there to help you. They're going to get you started. But the conversation with what that patient uses their eyes for is the most important part. A lot of the lenses by Cooper Vision have a dominant and non-dominant D or an N designation on the lens. And it means that the middle of the lens is for distance or the middle of the lens is for near. The dominant eye is typically used for distance, except in cases where there's like an accountant who's like right here all the time, 100% of the time. And then you can use the near lenses because that's where he's going to work. And then when he drives home at night, he's going to have to be aware that there's going to be a little bit of a halo around the headlights of cars. It's going to look like a Venn diagram driving at him when he's going down the road because of the way the lenses work. And that's one of the limitations that we have in our technology. I'm glad somebody got the Venn diagram. Most people are too old for that. Soft and rigid designs have aspheric or button type of designs. This is a pretty dramatic one. This was a really good distance lens right here. This is that patient who just really wants to see far away and be able to kind of pick up their golf score when they're doing the tallies. That's the design for them. You can see there's just that little tiny bit of reading that's going to get them by just a little bit here and there. They could never sit down at a computer and be functional with that type of a design. And the button designs are actually like a whole little ring and then another ring and then another ring. So it's kind of a concentric ring, but they're blended aspherically now. So we call them buttons because it's like the distance part is the button in the middle, or the reading part is that button in the middle of the lens. Again, a couple more popular ones. The Bosch & Lomb Ultra is the one that just came out, and they did a comparison to the leading lens of the Air Optics multifocal. And those graphs right there represent how much of the lens is dedicated to each power. And you can see that over on the Air Optics multifocal side, the one that came out in about 2010 and has been one of the best workhorses for presbyopia that we've ever used, now they're competing with it saying, well, we're going to give you a steady near vision zone, an aspheric drop to a steady intermediate zone. That's for your cell phone. That is exactly what you need for that patient who's got an iPad with them in your office, who's answering texts and answering phone calls in your waiting room and in your chair, and then a little bit of distance to get them by. The Air Optics Aqua multifocal, though, is a little bit different. You can see that it actually passes the written prescription of -3. That lens just kind of carries on by. So if you have a 4mm pupil, it's exactly what it says. But if you have a 5mm pupil, you get an extra 3/4 to a full diopter of bonus power that you can throw into that system, and you can give them a lot better reading. When you give them the better reading, their pupil expands, and now they can see better. So they take plus over their plus that you already gave them in the contact lens because of these aspheric designs. It's a slippery slope, but a lot of times people will be -3 when they come into your office, and they're walking out with especially if they're like over 60, if they come in -3, they're leaving with a 2 1/4 or a 2 high ad multifocal. You have to match up the patient needs. Now, I just didn't draw all the lines because every one of these patients could have different components of it. You've got your truck driver who's going to need their distance. Your accountant is going to need to find their golf ball. They're going to need to use a computer, and they're usually interested in seeing their friends' faces. Your athlete is really interested in their distance vision. They want something that they can wear that's not going to get really salty if they get sweat in their eyes. And your golfer is also looking for his golf ball, and he might even use his computer. Then you have your software designer who spends their entire day at that computer, and that ultra lens with that big intermediate zone is the way to go for that particular patient. And then you got your eye care provider, which is like me and my dad, who don't really care what things look like anymore. We have the chart memorized. Just give me something so that I can read, and I'm going to get through the day just fine. I work in a dark room. There's no lights. I don't really worry about it. My pupils are going to be big. I need the boost. So my dad, who was like -4, is in like a 250. But he drives a Prius at 55 miles an hour all the time. So it's okay. It works out. You have the balance there. You need to know your limitations, I guess. We're going to call out some possible goals. I want somebody to tell me, what does a 25-year-old white female, healthy, no med, slit lamp, normal keratometry, and a typical refraction want out of their contact lens? Go. An idea of what this person might be interested in. Distance, of course, because they're a myope. That's what they need. Perfect. What kind of comfort concerns do you think that they have? They want the most comfort, right? And they want something that's relatively inexpensive. Okay, that's the typical stuff. That's where we're going. I wanted a little bit. I tried to get it from you. We're going to keep working on that. Her wedding's in October. So dailies are going to give you the quickest adaptation. That's going to be the lens that's going to be excellent for a couple of hours minimum. You can throw that in their eye on their wedding day, even if you have to go to their house to give it to them, and they're going to be able to see for their wedding, and they're going to be all excited. And then, after a couple of months go by, they find out, hey, these lenses are really, really comfortable. I bought a 90-pack of these. I'm good through January, but I want to wear these every day now. I like it. I like this not wearing glasses thing. And then you can bring them back and refit them to something that's a little bit more economical, or a 2-weekly or a monthly type of lens. So you can always start and switch it over. You don't have to wait till the end of the year like a pair of glasses, or wait till they break, or remake something that costs a lot of money. You can just switch them. And that's one of the beauties of contact lenses. Number 2, a 39-year-old white female or male, insulin-dependent diabetic for 10 years. Toprol, his slit lamp exam is epithelial basement membrane dystrophy, a little tiny bit of cataract from the diabetes. He's got some stigmatism. We have a couple of different things to consider here. Does anybody know one of the things that I would need to do from that refraction to make it work for a contact lens? Anybody have a suggestion? Vertex, I got one. Anybody else? You're going to have to round the axis? Anybody see that? You got a 177. That's not a trial. And you can write that, and they go to order that contact lens online at 177, and they just call your office. What do I do? I have no idea what to do. So you got to pay attention to all of those little pieces. So the diabetes are good because, let's order them in either a 6-pack or a 90. So if we go with a monthly lens, let's get him a 6-month supply. Because, he could be minus 750 6 months from now if his A1C goes up to 12. It's possible. We won't rule that out. So we do try to manage that patient every 6 months so we can make sure that we're accommodating for him. And if he picks up all that extra minus, he's going to be upset. But if he picks up a bunch of extra plus, he's still not going to be able to see. So you need to work with him. He doesn't have a lot of time left on that focal depth, 39 years old. He's running a little short. So you have to pay attention to it. The corneal dystrophy, the best way to do that is to take those cylinders that were 150 and 125 and drop them to 75. Throw that all over. So we have to do the math for the vertex, and here we go. There's your refraction up there on the top, and there is the vertex equation down there at the bottom. You throw on the Oasis torque because it makes sense with the epithelial basement membrane dystrophy to use the thinnest lens that we have so that it doesn't really interfere with that at all. The problem is that every time he blinks, it rotates over 20 degrees. So I'm in the office, I have this on his eye, His vision's like 20, 30 plus. He's kind of happy, and he's like, well, maybe if they just settle down. But if it moves every time he blinks and it goes left, and you try to add and right, and you try to subtract, and you're doing all this math, and you keep changing the AccuView Oasis lens, it will fail. Biofinity holds a true 6 o'clock with this nice little teardrop indicator at the bottom of that. And in his left eye, he's thrilled because you happen to only have a 0.75 cylinder trial, and he's 20/20 with it. So now we have the stability. We cut some of that astigmatism out. I took it from the 125 eye. I didn't take it from the 150 eye. He wouldn't necessarily tolerate quite that big of a jump, but he could. It's worth a shot if the distortion is a problem. So you have your lenses there. It would be 575, 125 at 180, 450, 0.75, 180 for the win. 52-year-old white female. Atenolol, slit lamps, clear, little tiny bit of, cataract there. She's going to be okay. Not even really all that much glare. And she doesn't really have all that much astigmatism. But if you notice, she's 52. She's already in a 2 1/4 ad. So when I look at that and it comes down and it comes from another eye doctor or even comes from me, I'm thinking, those glasses could be 2 or 3 years old. That minus is going to start to go away. So when I vertex that down, you're going to drop it a little extra. So the fit guide tells me how to do it. I got the right eye dominant, the left eye. Their occupation is for sales. That's what they do. So they need to see people. Their salespeople need a lot of range of vision because they got to write stuff down with a pen, they got to type stuff into a computer, and they got to talk to people. So you need a really good depth of focus type of lens. We're going to go with the Air Optics multifocal. Since she reads pretty close and she's a 2 1/4 ad, I'm at least going to start with the mid. I don't want to go all the way to the high just yet. I want to save that in my back pocket because she's going to grow in her need for reading. And we throw that on, and she's doing great. She leaves my office. She goes for a week with these minus 450 plus 2, minus 475 plus 2 right off the box. She comes back, and it's just not quite clear enough. The distance and the reading are both just a little bit fuzzy after about a week. So I over-refract her, and magically she takes plus a half in both eyes. Remember, she said her distance was blurry, and she takes plus a half in both eyes. And everybody's mind screeches to a halt who's looking at those numbers going, why in the world would that happen? And the truth is in the aspheric design of the lenses. I go ahead and throw on the minus 4, which is a half less minus, and a half less minus out of the left eye, and poof, you get an excellent distance vision by adding plus. And the reason for it is that she was a little bit over minused. And your accommodative reflex requires 3 things to happen. Your eyes converge, the lens bends or moves slightly forward, and your pupils constrict. When you throw that extra plus a half over those eyes, you open up that pupil by a half a millimeter. You have now added 3/4 of a diopter of minus power into their system by giving them plus a half. All of the things work out really, really nice and neat when you actually do the math and look at it on paper, but the ultimate goal is to make that patient happy, make them see, and this is the lens that she walked out the door with, and she was good for 2 years until she came back, and we did a high ad in her non-dominant eye, and that's how you do a bifocal lens. It's trial and error and matching up the expectations of the patient. There's a lot of different buzzwords in my department. If you come on up, I'm going to tell you to push plus on someone over the age of 41, always, always, every single time. It's kind of like if what do you want to do? And then the other one is don't swim and sleep in your contacts. If you're going to be an extended wear contact lens person, prescribe them a 30 or a 90 pack of dailies for every year when they go on vacation. Then they can take the dailies, even if they're not as comfortable as their everyone, they are going to use them in a much more healthy way. So I will write for a 90 pack when I give someone an extended wear contact lens like the Air Optics Night and Day, because it's sort of the same rule. Like if you ever ask a woman if she's pregnant, don't sleep and swim in contact lenses. Never, ever, 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 ever do that. That is the best way to get yourself into a very, very bad situation. A small infection is, for me, it's a speeding ticket. The patient knows they're doing something wrong when they're sleeping in a lens that's not approved. They're aware of it, and if they're not, you're going to let them know that that's the problem. It's kind of like, officer, I didn't know what the speed limit was. It's the same exact concept. That little tiny infection gives us an opportunity to treat, and that ticket price goes up depending on how bad their story is. Their ticket price is how expensive a medication you choose. No, I'm just kidding. You have to choose a medicine that's going to work the best for that particular problem and manage that. And they're going to be in their old glasses that they didn't update for 4 years for a whole week. That is usually punishment enough for most people to stop sleeping in their contact lenses. But if they do, now they are fully aware of the risks. And the risk, if you are a speeder, is that you crash and you hurt somebody or have a major catastrophe. If you sleep in a contact lens, the risk is that you lose your eye. And if you put that picture in their head of a Pseudomonas penetrating the cornea, and all you have to say are those words in about 36 hours, which is theoretically true, a lot of times that gets them compliance. They just think of their eyeball like, they don't know all about this stuff. They just imagine the goo squeezing out during the night from their eye, and then they're in big trouble. And I don't even tell them most of the time that that's probably the most painful thing you could ever experience, aside from the fact that this is going to be a significant inconvenience till we get to heal it. You need to tell the patients why you're choosing a particular lens. There's 2 or 3 dozen brands of contact lenses out there, specific trade names that we can utilize, and there are dozens more in the world of complete custom lenses. That's a whole other lecture. So you need to tell that patient why you're choosing that lens for them so that they understand that you're looking out for their health and their comfort and their day-to-day work with that contact lens. You're not just giving them something, because I can put almost any of the lens with the same parameters on the eye. If you're a -2 sphere, I have at least 20 different lenses I could put on your eye, and you're going to see 20/20. The 1 or 2 of those that are the right one for you comes from your discussion with the patient and that patient's goals discussing them with you. Yes, you can wear contact lenses. I don't believe there's anybody out there that can't. I don't care if you had 6 corneal infections. You're going to go in a daily lens, probably one of those ones that disintegrates over the course of a day, but you could still wear a contact lens. It's going to be okay. Bad GPC, giant papillary conjunctivitis, that patient's been chronic. They're, a 17-year-old male is the classic one that gets it. You can wear a contact lens when you're -9 because you need to. You don't see as well out of your glasses. It's not quite as stable. They fall off your face. You're a 17-year-old boy. Glasses just are not your thing right now. Even with the GPC, we can treat the GPC and we can keep that contact lens going if we use the right contact lens. And it may take a couple of tries to get the right one that doesn't inflame the GPC. It may take 2 or 3 courses of a steroid, and it may even take a chronic histamine drop to maintain it, but it's possible. My little guy who has that, he's got allergy shots. He's in a world of hurt, but he wears his contacts because he's -9, -2, 25, just to make it in there. And then, yes, you clean your contact lenses every single day, unless you wear the Air Optics night and day where you just leave in your eye the whole time. That's the only exception, right? You don't want to mess up the silicone on those. Just kidding. You can take those out and clean them as often as you like. They'll still last the month, but it's not as necessary because that lens was built for that. And then the last part of it is, if your lens is not in my office today, I would be shocked. None of you guys have a lens that's not currently in stock in my office. I even have the CRT ones, okay? We're good. We got you covered. If you're outside of it, I can order it. I can find a way to do it, and I can put you in a contact lens. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Those night and day ones, they're people are supposed to sleep in those, or?
Yes, you can wear it absolutely as a daily lens. It is recommended for that, but it is FDA approved for up to 30 days of extended wear, meaning you can sleep in it. Like I said, I do give those people some daily lenses for their vacation times because I don't want them swimming in the lenses. If they swim in a lens by mistake, if they are at someone's house and they have a hot tub party or something like that, and that lens becomes contaminated, it can be worn for the remainder of the 30 days if they take it out every single night. Once it's slept in, it's not necessarily thrown out, but you can't sleep in it again once you swim in it. That's where it comes down to it. So if you want to wear the night and day lens and you want to sleep in it for 9 months out of the year, but in the summer you go out swimming or go on vacation, just don't sleep in a lens that's been exposed to pool water or hot tub water or ocean or lake. Just don't sleep in that lens. You can clean it. I mean, you can do clear care and everything. That's great. It'll work for that lens. It's totally compatible. It won't be a problem. But just don't sleep in it once it's been slept in. You just don't want to take that risk.
And at what level do you start correcting for astigmatism? Like, do you just...
I usually wait till I get to 75 or 1 to start getting it in there. There is no plus a half or minus a half toric contact lens trial. It doesn't exist. There are a handful of engineer types with a half sil that are going to need that 75 just because their clarity that's their livelihood. So you can go up in the sil in a few cases where you're at 0.5 and the spherical lens just isn't giving them that sharpness or the clarity. A lot of times what I do is I choose a monthly higher modulus lens so it's a little bit stiffer because it'll cover that corneal astigmatism up really, really smooth. It'll go over pretty easily. You just work on your spherical equivalent. You take that plus a half and you take a quarter of minus off of the lens to make that the right trial to start with. Remember, all these lenses, you put them on the eye, you're going to over-refract them. So even if your calculation's terrible, you have a chance to correct yourself. You put them behind that phoropter after the lens is in their eye, and you put plus a half sphere in both eyes to start, and they should be blurry. If you put plus a half sphere, you may have forgot to vertex. And you just keep on pushing plus until you get to the end of it. And then you pull the next trial based on that over-refraction. So you have a number of safety nets to get that prescription right because you're going to see that patient that day with the lenses, look at them on their eyes to make sure that they don't like suction cup like glue. Only like 2 lenses anymore would ever do that, but they could. And then you check for the rotation of the astigmatism, and you do it near and distance acuities. A lot of times when I'm doing a multifocal lens, I am sort of cheating a little bit. Even the lens fitting guides tell you you're going to do kind of a modified monovision. So I do all of their testing with a bifocal lens OU, both eyes open, so that they have an idea of how their eyes are going to work in the real world. And if they start going like this and happen to notice it, that's okay. Just tell them to take a deep breath. We're going to make everything work. We'll try another trial in 2 weeks, but give these a shot because you're 20/20 right now, and we need to go ahead and see how these work in your real world. And then when they come back, you listen to their story and you make the modifications based on what they tell you they need.
If you have a keratoconic patient that says, I can't wear hard contacts, I've tried them, they suck.
Scleral.
Scleral.
Absolutely. Every single time. They are almost, and some of the people who have worn, there is a soft contact lens for keratoconus that's in my next lecture next time. It's called the Novacone. It works pretty well, but it does tend to have a fishbowl kind of effect because it's a really thick lens. I mean, it's got a center thickness of almost like 3 millimeters sometimes. So it's got some serious guts. So they do exist. That works. The hybrid lens is something that I don't even play with that one anymore. I'm done with that. But it exists, and it's good for 6 months if you really needed to get someone by for a little while till it sort of tightens up on them. The scleral lenses have come out over the last 2 or 3 years. I really started fitting them. So I'm transitioning people who are successful small RGP wearers to scleral lenses and just getting great reviews on it. You can put astigmatism in a scleral lens a lot easier than you can put it in a standard RGP. And you can put like 7 diopters of astigmatism into a lens and it'll stabilize pretty well because it's got the whole entire sclera to hold on to. So that's where I go. When you get a keratoconic patient, scleral lens. That's the way to do it. I typically don't start with a scleral. They have to fail with another lens version first because they're intimidating to put in. And a lot of the people who I do what I consider a cold fit, like first contact lens on a 20-year-old with keratoconus, it's really tough to get them into it, to get them to take it, because it's huge. I mean, it's like a process to get into the eye. Once they got it down, though, you're good to go. The biggest limit on the scleral lens is the patient's motivation to put them in their eye every morning. That's the only limit that they have. What else? Those are great questions. I have a whole thing on sclerals and keratoconus. That's coming up later. That's the fun part for me. These are neat, but those are kind of fun. Alrighty. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the participation. I had to get a little more.